Chapter 12 of A Strange Disappearance. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Mary Rohde. A Strange Disappearance by Anna Katharine Green. Chapter 12. A Woman's Love. Shall I ever forget the blast of driving rain that struck our faces and enveloped us in a cloud of wet, as the door swung on its hinges and led us forth into the night? Or the electric thrill that shot through me as the slender girl grasped my hand and drew me away through the blinding darkness? It was not that I was so much affected by her beauty as influenced by her power and energy. The fury of the gale seemed to bend to her will, the wind lend wings to her feet. I began to realize what intellect was. Arrived at the roadside, she paused and looked back. The two burly forms of the men we had left behind us were standing in the door of the inn. In another moment they had plunged forth and toward us. With a low cry the young girl leaped towards a tree, where, to my unbounded astonishment, I beheld my horse standing ready saddled. Dragging the mare from her fastenings, she hung the lantern, burning as it was, on the pommel of the saddle, struck the panting creature a smart blow upon the flank, and drew back with a leap to my side. The startled horse snorted, gave a plunge of dismay, and started away from us down the road. "We will wait," said Luttra. The words were no sooner out of her mouth than her father and brother rushed by. "They will follow the light," whispered she, and seizing me again by the hand, she hurried me away in the direction opposite to that which the horse had taken. "If you will trust me, I will bring you to shelter," she murmured, bending her slight form to the gusty wind, but relaxing not a whit of her speed. "You are too kind," I murmured in return. "Why should you expose yourself to such an extent for a stranger?" Her hand tightened on mine, but she did not reply, and we hastened on as speedily as the wind and rain would allow. After a short but determined breasting of the storm, during which my breath had nearly failed me, she suddenly stopped. "Do you know," she exclaimed in a low, impressive tone, "that we are on the verge of a steep and dreadful precipice? It runs along here for a quarter of a mile, and it is not an uncommon thing for a horse and rider to be dashed over it in a night like this." There was something in her manner that awakened a chill in my veins, almost as if she had pointed out some dreadful doom which I had unwittingly escaped. "This is, then, a dangerous road," I murmured. "Very," was her hurried and almost incoherent reply. How far we traveled through the mud and tangled grasses of that horrible road I do not know. It seemed a long distance. It was probably not more than 3/4 of a mile. At last she paused with a short "Here we are," and looking up, I saw that we were in front of a small unlighted cottage. No refuge ever appeared more welcome to a pair of sinking wanderers, I am sure. Wet to the skin, bedrabbled with mud, exhausted with breasting the gale, we stood for a moment under the porch to regain our breath. Then with her characteristic energy she lifted the knocker and struck a smart blow on the door. "We will find shelter here," said she. She was not mistaken. In a few moments we were standing once more before a comfortable fire, hastily built by the worthy couple whose slumbers we had just interrupted. As I began to realize the sweetness of conscious safety, all that this young heroic creature had done for me swept warmly across my mind. Looking up from the fire that was beginning to infuse its heat through my grateful system, I surveyed her as she slowly undid her long braids and shook them dry over the blaze, and almost started to see how young she was. Not more than 16, I should say, and yet what an invincible will shone from her dark eyes and dignified her slender form. A will gentle as it was strong, elevated as it was unbending. I bowed my head as I watched her, in grateful thankfulness which I presently put into words. At once she drew herself erect. "I did but my duty," said she quietly. "I am glad I was prospered in it." Then slowly, "If you are grateful, sir, will you promise to say nothing of what took place at the inn?" Instantly I remembered a suspicion which had crossed my mind while there, and my hand went involuntarily to my vest pocket. The roll of bills was gone. She did not falter. "I would be relieved if you would," continued she. I drew out my empty hand, looked at it, but said nothing. "Have you lost anything?" asked she. "Search in your overcoat pockets." I plunged my hand into the one nearest her and drew it out with satisfaction. The roll of bills was there. "I give you my promise," said I. "You will find a bill missing," she murmured. "For what amount I do not know. The sacrifice of something was inevitable." "I can only wonder over the ingenuity you displayed, as well as express my appreciation for your bravery," returned I with enthusiasm. "You are a noble girl." She put out her hand as if compliments hurt her. "It is the first time they have ever attempted anything like that," cried she in a quick low tone full of shame and suffering. "They have shown a disposition to take money sometimes, but they never threatened life before, and they did threaten yours. They saw you take out your money through a hole pierced in the wall of the room you occupied, and the sight made them mad. They were going to kill you, and then tumble you and your horse over the precipice below there. But I overheard them talking, and when they went out to saddle the horse, I hurried up to your room to wake you. I had to take possession of the bills. You were not safe while you held them. I took them quietly because I hoped to save you without betraying them. But I failed in that. You must remember they are my father and my brother." "I will not betray them," said I. She smiled. It was a wintry gleam, but it ineffably softened her face. I became conscious of a movement of pity towards her. "You have a hard lot," remarked I. "Your life must be a sad one." She flashed upon me one glance of her dark eye. "I was born for hardship," said she, "but," and a sudden wild shudder seized her, "but not for crime." The word fell like a drop of blood wrung from her heart. "Good heavens!" cried I. "And must you—" "No," rang from her lips in a clarion like peal. "Some things cut the very bonds of nature. I am not called upon to cleave to what will drag me into infamy." Then calmly, as if speaking of the most ordinary matter in the world, "I shall never go back to that house we have left behind us, sir." "But," cried I, glancing at her scanty garments, "where will you go? What will you do? You are young—" "And very strong," she interrupted. "Do not fear for me." And her smile was like a burst of sudden sunshine. I said no more that night. But when in the morning I stumbled upon her sitting in the kitchen, reading a book not only above her position, but beyond her years, a sudden impulse seized me and I asked her if she would like to be educated. The instantaneous illumining of her whole face was sufficient reply without her low emphatic words. "I would be content to study